Chapter 1, Education and Student Life, page 5, Activity 2, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns: curriculum, discipline, drawback, effort, exhaustion, rankings, secondary school, status, values, verbs, achieve, compare, determines, reflects, separate, track, adjectives, competitive, entire, global, identical, isolated, universal. Expressions, in contrast to, one size fits all. On the one hand, on the other hand, the best and the brightest. Page 6, Activity 4, Reading an Article.
The secrets of success in school. What leads to success in school? Every 3 years, 15-year-old students in secondary school sit down to take the same exams in reading, mathematics, and science. The PISA, Program for International Student Assessment, collects and studies the results from 64 to 70 countries. Countries that usually do the best on these tests are Finland, Korea, and Singapore. Because the global economy is becoming more competitive, educators and governments worldwide are paying close attention to these tests to find how their countries compare and to learn how they can improve. What are these countries doing right? Should all countries follow their example? Is it possible to follow their example? Tracking. One frequent question is about the tracking of students. When schools track students, they place them in groups or classes according to their ability or need. This occurs in Singapore, for example, one of the most successful countries on the PISA tests. Tracking is based on the belief that students are not born with identical ability. Because they are not exactly the same, the belief is that the best students will be bored, and weak students will have difficulty in the same class with the same subjects. In Singapore, students in the special group go on to the university. Express students become clerical workers. Normal students become salespeople and road sweepers. However, in Finland and other of the most successful countries on the PISA test, educators do not separate students into different groups or schools. Instead, different types of learners study together. Students who do well and achieve success serve as good examples for other students who aren't doing so well. Clearly, tracking works well in some countries, but not others. Hard work. How much effort is necessary for success in school? How hard do students need to work? In Korea, typical high school students get up very early, spend all day in school, and spend many hours after school in private institutes or at night doing homework. Korean students need great discipline, self-control, to give up sports, hobbies, and social life. They do this in order to be successful both in school and on the important college entrance exams. Their goal is to get into the right university. A common belief among Korean students is that they can enter college if they get 4 hours of sleep each night, but not if they sleep 5 or more. Of course, one drawback, or disadvantage, is that Korean students experience exhaustion and a great deal of stress. From this example, it seems that students from countries with high PISA scores have to work very hard. On the other hand, in Finland, children do not start school until they are 7 years old. They don't have to worry about grades because teachers don't give grades until high school. In high school, teachers give grades, but there are no lists with rankings of students from low to high. Perhaps most interesting, students have very little homework, and yet Finnish students still rank very high on the PISA exams. It appears that hard competitive work is not the only road to success. Educators. Is there nothing that the top-ranking countries have in common? Is there no lesson we can learn from these countries? Well, actually there is. The quality of teachers seems to be important to student success. In Singapore, Korea, and Finland, teachers have high status or social position. For this reason, the teaching profession attracts the best and the brightest. In Korea, people call them nation builders. In Finland, getting into a teacher training program is very competitive. Only 10% of Finnish college graduates are accepted into teacher training programs. All teachers must have master's degrees, which also gives them status. This is in contrast to many countries, such as the United States, where teachers generally do not have high status. The United States is not among the top PISA countries. Curriculum. The PISA results also suggest the importance of curriculum. In countries such as Finland and Korea, there is a universal curriculum. Students of the same age study the same subjects in the entire country. In the United States, each state determines its own curriculum. Perhaps because the 50 states decide on their own curricula, some U.S. states rank very high on the PISA exams, and some rank low. The word curriculum refers not only to the courses that students take, but also to all of the topics in each course. In countries that do well on the PISA exam, a typical 8th grade course focuses on 10 to 15 topics. In the United States, an 8th grade course typically includes 35 topics. Perhaps this is too many. Conclusion. On the one hand, it seems that education is not a one-size-fits-all situation. There isn't one perfect educational system that is right for all countries. Each educational system is a mirror that reflects the values of its own culture. On the other hand, it seems clear that each country can improve. There is no magic solution, but in this global economy, no educational system is isolated from others, and each can learn from others.
Page 13, Activity 1, Skimming for the topic and the main idea.
Challenges of the first year of college. Charles Dickens once famously referred to a specific period of history as the best of times and the worst of times. This can also describe the college years of many students. College is a time of transition between high school and working life, between childhood and adulthood, between dependence on family and independence. Like any period of growth, the college years can be both painful and exciting. Educators have some practical advice so that students can successfully deal with their problems and get the most out of their college experience. Many students who are beginning college, even students who were very successful in high school, find that the classes are suddenly much more challenging than in high school and that much more studying is required. Educators usually agree on the solution to this problem of too much work. You need to get organized. First, choose wisely the combination of classes you take in any one semester. Balance harder ones with easier ones. Also, limit the number of classes you take. Don't try to take more than a full-time load of credits in the first semester. Second, keep a careful calendar of dates for all exams and when all assignments are due. Professors will hand out a page with these dates on the first day of class. Put them immediately on your master calendar and plan ahead. Third, Schedule regular time and find a quiet place in which to study so that you won't have to suddenly cram the day before an important exam. You might pass a test by cramming for it, but you won't remember much afterward, and this isn't true learning. Fourth, form a study group with students in some of your classes and meet with them once or twice a week. Also, take advantage of the resources on campus, such as tutors or the Writing Center. Fifth, although this might seem obvious, it's important to go to class. Some students believe they can pass by simply doing the reading and taking exams, but this isn't true. Finally, it's essential to include breaks, short ones and longer ones, to balance study time with time for fun. This will keep your mind fresh and clear. Money is a problem for many college students. Every year, students drop out because they simply can't afford to continue. Tuition costs are rising fast at many colleges, and these fees for classes are not the only expense that students have. There are also costs for housing, if the student lives away from home, books, food, transportation, clothes, and entertainment. The solution to the challenge of paying for a college education has several components. It begins in the year before starting college. If possible, students need to choose a college that's more affordable, even if it isn't their first choice. Then they should explore the possibilities at the financial aid office. Are there scholarships? Are there student loans with a low rate of interest? Students might need to get a job, on campus or off, and take fewer classes, even if it means graduating later than they would like. This is often preferable to having huge debt after graduation. One last component to dealing with the challenge of money is to avoid credit cards. They are too easy to use, and they get too many students into troublesome debt. A problem for many college students is depression, usually as a result of either loneliness or the pressure of their studies. The healthiest way to deal with depression is to connect with other people on a regular basis. These can be roommates, classmates, professors, and academic advisors. It's important, too, to stay in touch with family and old friends. However, serious depression probably requires the attention of a professional counselor. Most campuses have free counseling services. Problems with studies, money, and depression can make college the worst of times. However, college is also where most students learn about themselves and learn about the world. This is where they make friends for life. With careful organization, planning, and attention to relationships with others, students can achieve a balance that can make college the best of times, too.
Chapter 2, City Life. Page 25, Activity 3, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns: agricultural operation, crops, developing countries, gridlock, mass transit, pedestrian zone, pollution, priorities, produce, recycling plant, trash, urban dwellers, verbs: commute, crowd, cultivate, predict, solve, worsening. Adjectives: affluent, creative. Adverb: efficiently.
Page 27, Activity 5, Reading an Article.
A city that's doing something right. There's good news and bad news about life in modern cities. First, the bad. People who study population growth predict a nightmare by the year 2025. The global population will be more than 8 billion, and almost 4 billion of these people will be living in cities in developing countries, such as India and Nigeria. Population growth is already causing unbelievable overcrowding. Due to this overcrowding, many cities have problems with air pollution, disease, and crime. People spend hours in gridlock, that is, traffic so horrible that it simply doesn't move, when they commute daily from their homes to their work and back. There isn't enough water, transportation, or housing. Many people don't have access to health services or jobs. Now the good news. In some cities, instead of worsening, urban life is actually getting much better. A city and its mayor. It might not be a surprise to find that life in affluent cities is improving, but what about cities that aren't rich? The city of Curitiba, Brazil, proves that it's possible for even a city in a developing country to offer a good life to its residents. The former mayor of Curitiba for 25 years, Jaime Lerner, is an architect and a very practical person. Under his leadership, the city planners established a list of priorities, in other words, a list of what was most important to work on. They decided to focus on the environment and on the quality of life. With an average income of only about $2,000 per person per year, Curitiba has the same problems as many cities. However, it also has some creative solutions. Garbage collection. One creative solution is the method of garbage collection, cambio verde, or green exchange. This does far more than clean the streets of trash. In neighborhoods that garbage trucks can't reach, poor people bring bags of trash to special centers. At these centers, they exchange the trash for fresh produce such as potatoes and oranges. They receive 1 kilo of produce for every 4 kilos of trash that they bring in. At a recycling plant, workers separate glass bottles, plastic, and cans from other trash. 2/3 of Curitiba's garbage is recycled, which is good for the environment. And the plant gives jobs to the poorest people, which improves their lives. Transportation. Due to careful planning, Curitiba does not have the same traffic problems that most cities have. The statistics are surprising. The population has grown fast, to over 2 million people, but traffic has actually decreased 30%. Curitiba needed a mass transit system but couldn't afford an expensive subway. City planners began instead with an unusual system of buses in the center lanes of 5 wide major streets. At each bus stop, there is a 40-foot-long glass tube. Passengers pay before they enter the tube. Then they get on the bus, subway style, through wide doors. This allows people to get on and off the bus quickly and efficiently. People don't crowd onto the bus. Loading and unloading takes only 30 seconds. This makes commuting more pleasant and also helps to solve the problem of air pollution. A creative social program. There is an agricultural operation just outside Curitiba that looks like other farms but actually helps to solve a social problem, in addition to growing crops. At Fazenda da Solidariedade, Solidarity Farm, the workers are not experienced farmers. Instead, they are drug addicts and alcoholics who volunteer to spend up to 9 months in a program called Verde Saúde, Green Health. The program helps them in 2 ways. First, it gives them jobs. They cultivate medicinal plants and then process them into herbal teas, syrups, and other products that are sold in health food stores. Second, it helps them to get off drugs and alcohol and to turn their lives around. In exchange for their labor, they receive counseling, medical care, and job training. The environment. To make the environment both cleaner and more beautiful, Curitiba encourages green space. It has low taxes for companies that have green areas, so several hundred major industries such as Pepsi and Volvo have offices in the city, since they are willing to incorporate green space in their plants in order to take advantage of the city's low tax rate. Bringing natural beauty into the city is a priority. For this reason, Curitiba gave 1.5 million young trees to neighborhoods to plant and take care of. And the downtown shopping area is now a pedestrian zone. In other words, for walkers only, not cars, and is lined with gardens. Curitiba provides the city people with 22 million square meters of parks and green areas, more than 3 times the amount that the World Health Organization recommends for urban dwellers. A symbol of the possible. Clearly, overcrowding in big cities worldwide is the cause of serious problems. However, the example of Curitiba provides hope that careful planning and creative thinking can lead to solutions. Curitiba is truly, as Lewis Mumford once said of cities in general, a symbol of the possible.
Page 33, Activity 2, Skimming for Main Ideas.
Sick building syndrome. Elizabeth Steinberg was a healthy 16-year-old student on the tennis team at St. Charles High School, west of Chicago, Illinois. But then, she started to have strange health problems. The same thing happened to dozens of teachers and students at the school. They went to doctors for treatment of a number of symptoms, such as sore throats, tiredness, headaches, and respiratory, breathing difficulties. Doctors treated respiratory infections with antibiotics, but the condition didn't seem to improve, except, mysteriously, on weekends and over vacations when the symptoms disappeared. Experts came to investigate and find the cause. They discovered that St. Charles High, like thousands of other schools and office buildings nationwide, is a sick building. In other words, a building that creates its own indoor air pollution. People have worried about smog for many years, and the government has spent billions of dollars to try to clean up the air of big cities. But now we find that there is no escape from unhealthy air. Recent studies have shown that air inside many homes, office buildings, and schools is full of pollutants: chemicals, mold, bacteria, smoke, and gases. These pollutants are causing a group of unpleasant and dangerous symptoms that experts call sick building syndrome. First discovered in 1982, sick building syndrome most often includes symptoms similar to those of the flu: watering eyes, headaches, and so on, and respiratory infections such as tonsillitis, bronchitis, and pneumonia. Although most common in office buildings and schools, the indoor pollution that causes sick building syndrome can also occur in houses. Imagine a typical home. The people who live there burn oil, wood, or gas for cooking and heating. They might smoke cigarettes, pipes, or cigars. They use chemicals for cleaning. They use products made of particle board, which is an inexpensive kind of board made of very small pieces of wood held together with a chemical. They use products such as computers, fax machines, and copiers that are made of plastic. These products give off chemicals that we can't see, but we do breathe them in. In some homes, carbon monoxide from cars in the garage can enter the house. And in many areas, the ground under the building might send a dangerous gas called radon into the home. The people in the house are breathing in a chemical soup. Then what causes sick building syndrome in an office building or school where people don't smoke or burn oil, wood, or gas? Experts have discovered several sources of sick building syndrome. Among these are mold and bacteria, synthetic products, and lack of ventilation, or the movement of fresh air into and out of the building. In many buildings, rain has leaked in and caused water damage to walls and carpets. This allows mold and bacteria to grow. Air conditioning systems are another place where mold and bacteria can grow. Synthetic, that is, man-made, products such as paint, carpeting, and furniture can be found in all offices and schools. These products release toxic, poisonous chemicals into the air. Perhaps the most common cause of sick building syndrome, however, is lack of ventilation. Most modern office buildings are tightly sealed, In other words, the windows don't open, so fresh air doesn't enter the building. In a building with mold, bacteria, or toxic chemicals, lack of ventilation makes the situation more serious. There are several solutions to the problem of sick building syndrome. The most important of these is cleaning the building. First, of course, experts must determine the specific cause in any one building. Then workers probably need to take out carpets, wallpaper, and ceiling tiles in order to remove mold and bacteria. Also, they need to clean out the air conditioning system and completely rebuild the system of ventilation. They should remove synthetic products and bring in natural products instead, if they are available. All of this sounds difficult and expensive, but there is another possible solution that is simple and inexpensive. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was trying to find ways to clean the air in space stations. One scientist with NASA discovered that houseplants actually remove pollutants from the air. Certain plants seem to do this better than others. Spider plants, for example, appear to do the best job. Even defoliated plants, without leaves, worked well. In another study, scientists found that the chemical interaction among soil, roots, and leaves works to remove pollutants. This seems like a good solution, but we don't know enough yet. There are many questions. For instance, which pollutants can plants remove? Which can't they remove? How many plants are necessary to clean the air in a room? 1 or 2 or a whole forest of plants? When we are able to answer these questions, we might find that plants offer an important pollution control system for the 21st century.
Page 41, Chapter 2, Part 3. Activity 2. Understanding parts of speech. Verb. Create. Verb. Crowd. Verb. Differ. Noun. Difficulty. Adverb. Efficiently. Adjective. Polluted. Noun. Prediction. Adjective. Safe. Noun. Solution. Adverb. Worse.
Chapter 3, Business and Money, page 49, Activity 3, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns. Access. Capacity. Character. Collateral. Eradication. Fund. Grants. Literacy. Microlending. Poverty. Requirement. Verbs. Funding. Invest. Lift. Adjectives. Anonymous. Social. Subsidiary. Worthless. Expressions. Peer pressure. Took, take the initiative. Page 52, Activity 7, Reading an article.
Banking on poor women. For many people, there seems to be no escape from poverty. In other words, they are poor and they have no hope that this will ever change. In addition, they have the social problems of poverty, among them low social status, violence, poor health, and lack of education. Imagine this situation. A poor woman has an idea for a small business to lift herself and her family out of poverty. She needs a little money to begin this business. She goes to a bank to borrow the money, and the banker interviews her. At this bank, as at most banks, the borrower must meet 3 necessary conditions: character, capacity, and collateral. That is, if this woman wants to borrow money from the bank, she must show that she, 1, is honest, has character, 2, is able to run her business, has capacity, and 3, owns a house, land, or something valuable, has collateral, for the bank to take if she can't pay back the money. So, what happens to the woman? The bank won't lend her the money because she doesn't have any collateral. In such a situation, there seems to be no way for the woman to break the cycle of poverty and the problems that are associated with it. Microlending. One possible solution these days is microlending. This is a system of special banks and programs that are loaning money to the poorest of the poor. The idea began in Bangladesh with a man named Muhammad Yunus, who founded Grameen Bank. The bank lends small amounts of money to people who want to go into business. These are people who could never receive a loan from a regular bank. To receive a loan through Grameen Bank, people still must have character and capacity, but collateral is not necessary any longer. There is a different requirement. Each borrower must join a borrowing group. This small group meets regularly, follows a list of rules from the bank, and offers advice and support to members. Instead of collateral, there is peer pressure, i.e., group members make sure that each person pays back his or her loan. They want to keep their good name and continue doing business with the bank. What works, what doesn't? Grameen Bank has had many successes and only a few failures. In a developing country such as Bangladesh, a person can buy a cow or a sewing machine and begin a small business with only $20 to $50. Today, there are 8.35 million borrowers in 81,379 villages in Bangladesh. The bank makes over $123 million in loans in a typical month, and the repayment rate is an amazing 96.67%. At first, the bank lent half of the money to men and half to women. Unfortunately, most of the Bangladeshi men spent the money on themselves, not the business. Now, 96% of the borrowers are women. In Bangladesh and other countries that started similar microlending programs, the bankers soon learned that urban programs were not as successful as rural ones. Borrowers in cities did not always repay the loans. Because of the importance of peer pressure, microlending is more effective in small villages, where everyone knows and depends on everyone else, and in urban areas, where it's possible to be anonymous, unknown. Subsidiary effect. The primary goal of this and other similar programs is the eradication of poverty. However, as poverty has decreased, there have been some surprising secondary effects of microlending programs. Perhaps the main subsidiary effect has been a change in the social status of women. Traditionally, in some societies, people thought of women as worthless. But when a woman has access to money and is able to demonstrate her capacity for business, she often receives more respect than before from the male members of her family and from the entire village. Global Fund for Women. In any country, women are the poorest of the poor. They produce more than half of the world's food, but they own just 1% of the world's land. They are 51% of the world's population, but very, very little money goes to programs to help them. In the late 1980s, Anne Firth Murray took the initiative and began the Global Fund for Women. Unlike micro-lending programs, this fund gives grants, not loans. The money is given, not lent. Another difference is that, unlike Grameen Bank, which helps people begin businesses, the direct focus of the Global Fund for Women is to help find solutions to social ills, e.g., violence against women, lack of health care, and lack of education. Since 1987, the fund has given $88 million to over 4,300 women's groups in 172 countries. For instance, the fund has helped the Petersburg Center for Women in St. Petersburg, Russia. This center cares for women who are the victims of violence and abuse from family members. In Kenya, the Global Fund supports a program that gives health care and education to women with AIDS. In a village in southern India, it is funding a woman who has started a literacy program to teach poor women to read. Breaking the cycle. Grameen Bank and the Global Fund for Women may use different methods, but they have the same goal: the eradication of poverty. They also have a lesson for banks around the world. It's good business to give a chance to the poor. With careful planning, education, and cooperation, most people use the money well and then invest the money and knowledge back into their communities. There is hope that they can begin to break the cycle of poverty for themselves, their families, and society.
Page 57, Activity 2. Identifying the topic and main idea.
Consumerism and the human brain. We are all consumers. We all buy and use products and services. That is, we consume. The word comes from the Latin consumere, which means to use up, to waste, or destroy. Most of us don't think of ourselves as wasteful or destructive, but the world economy is based on consumerism. Today, people worldwide have greater access than ever before to a huge variety of products, and often to dozens of brands of the same product. What makes us decide to buy brand A instead of brand B when the two items are really identical? Why do we buy things that we don't actually need? The answer lies in marketing, the advertising and selling of products. Successful marketers use their knowledge of psychology and, increasingly, of recent studies of the human brain to persuade us to consume more and more. A good understanding of human weakness is essential if a company wants to sell a product. One way that advertisers persuade us to buy a product is by targeting our dissatisfaction with ourselves, our fears. Consider for a moment a typical fear: fear of being offensive to other people. Advertisers persuade us, for example, that if we don't buy their mouthwash, we'll have bad breath and offend other people. Dentists tell us that mouthwash is actually unnecessary. They explain that we need only simple dental hygiene, regular correct use of a soft toothbrush, and of dental floss. But we continue to spend money on mouthwash, breath freshener, and breath mints. Our fear of offending people outweighs our dentist's logic. In a similar way, advertisers also take advantage of our need for a good self-image, our desire to appear attractive, successful, and even exciting. Take the example of the Marlboro cowboy. For years, this famous image has appeared everywhere, in even the smallest rural villages. Many men see it and think that's the kind of person they would like to be: strong, handsome, and adventurous, a person with an exciting life. Although it's irrational, impossible to explain reasonably, they buy the cigarettes because they want to be like the Marlboro Man. It's common knowledge that the original model for these advertisements was a man addicted to smoking who died of lung cancer. However, this brand of cigarette remains very popular. Another example is the recent popularity in the United States of SUVs, sport utility vehicles. These vehicles are more expensive than most cars. They use more gas and create more pollution than most cars. They take up more space than most cars. But TV commercials show them climbing rocky mountain roads and crossing rivers, which seems exciting to many people. Most people who buy an SUV never get out of the city. They spend their morning commute in gridlock, not driving up and down mountains. Although it may seem irrational, advertisers persuade them that SUV owners are people with an exciting life. With so many different, but almost identical brands of the same product, what causes us to choose one brand instead of another? According to Dr. Alan Hirsch, our sense of smell actually influences our opinion of a product and our decision to buy it. A scientist at the Smell and Taste Treatment and Research Foundation in Chicago, Hirsch ran a careful, well-organized study. There were 2 identical rooms with an identical pair of Nike sneakers in each room. There was only one difference. He sprayed one of the rooms with a scent of flowers. Volunteers entered each room and answered questions about the sneakers. The result was that 84% of the people preferred the sneakers in the room with the floral smell, even though they were exactly the same as the ones in the other room. There is also the effect of self-fulfilling prophecies. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a situation in which people cause a prediction to come true. For example, a teacher tells a class that they are especially intelligent, and that semester the class does especially well on exams. In marketing, a successful advertisement persuades consumers that a product works well. Their belief causes them to use the product in such a way that it does work well. For example, the ads for brand X of a diet pill say, "Take this pill and you will lose weight because you won't be hungry." So people buy brand X. Because they believe it will cause weight loss, they begin to eat less. They establish a new habit of eating less. The result? They lose weight. Is this because of the pill or because they are eating less? Most of us like to think that we are reasonable, independent thinkers. We like to believe that we have a good reason for our choices. We don't want to buy products because of some strange compulsion, some irrational desire that we can't control. The truth is, however, that with their increasing knowledge of what goes on in the human brain, marketers might have more power over us than we realize.
Chapter 4, Jobs and Professions. Page 72, Activity 2, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns. Career counselors. Cell phones. Construction. Drawback. Globalization. Identity. Job hopping. Job security. Livelihood. Manufacturing jobs. Outsourcing. Pleasure. Posts. Self-confidence. Stress. Telecommuting. Workaholism. Workforce. Verbs. Distract. Keep up with. Overwork. Upgrade. Varies. Vary. Adjectives. Flexible. Leisure. passionate, rigid, secure, temporary, worldwide, expression, on the move.
Page 74, Activity 6, Reading an Article.
Changing career trends. 100 years ago, in most of the world, people didn't have much choice about the work that they would do, where they would do it, or how they would do it. If their parents were farmers, they became farmers. The society and tradition determined their profession. 20 years ago, in many countries, people could choose their livelihood. They also had the certainty of a job for life, but they usually couldn't choose to change from one employer to another, or from one profession to another. Today, this is not always the case. Career counselors tell us that the world of work is changing at great speed and will change dramatically in the next 25 years. Job security. The situation varies from country to country, but in today's economy, there is generally less job security worldwide. Even in Japan, where people traditionally had a very secure job for life, there is now no promise of a lifetime job with the same company. One reason for the lack of job security is the worldwide decrease in manufacturing jobs. Another reason is employers' need to hold down costs. This has resulted in two enormous changes for the workforce. First, employers are creating more and more temporary jobs because they don't need to pay health insurance or other benefits to employees in these positions, as they would to people in permanent posts. Second, more and more companies are outsourcing. In other words, they are closing offices and factories and sending work to other areas of the country or to other countries where labor is cheaper. This happens with factory work and computer programming. Also, the call center industry is on the move, mostly to India. Increasingly, when customers in Canada, the United States, England, and Australia call a company to order a product or ask for help with their computer, they actually speak with someone in India, although they might not know it. India is popular with companies because there is a well-educated workforce, salaries are much lower than in other countries, and educated people are already fluent in English. New call center employees in India spend months in training. They learn to use the accent of their customers, Australian or American, for example. The effect of insecurity. On the surface, it may seem that lack of job security is something undesirable. Indeed, pessimists point out that it is certainly a cause of stress. Many people find an identity, a sense of self, through their work. When they lose their job, or are afraid of losing it, they also lose their self-confidence or belief in their own ability. This causes worry and depression. In Japan, for example, the daily newspaper Asahi reports a sudden rise in the number of businessmen who need psychological help for their clinical depression. However, this decrease in job security may not necessarily be something bad. It is true that these days, workers must be more flexible, able to change to fit new situations. But optimists claim that flexible people are essentially happier, more creative, and more energetic than people who are rigid. Job hopping. Jumping from job to job or job hopping has always been more common in some professions, such as building construction, and not very common in other professions, like medicine and teaching. Today, job hopping is increasingly common in many fields because of globalization, technology, and a movement from manufacturing to services in developed countries. For example, people with factory jobs in industrial nations lose their jobs when factories move to countries where the pay is lower. The workers then need to upgrade their skills to find a new job. This is stressful, but the new job is usually better than the old one. Because technology changes fast, workers need continuing education if they want to keep up with the field. Clearly, technology provides both challenges and opportunities. Telecommuting. In many ways, technology is changing the way people work. There are advantages and disadvantages to this. In some professions, for instance, telecommuting is now possible. People can work at home for some or all of the week and communicate by email, cell phone, and video chat. An advantage of this is that it saves them from the stress of commuting to the workplace. It also allows them to plan their own time. On the other hand, it is difficult for some people to focus on work when they are at home. The refrigerator, TV, and their children often distract them. Telecommuters must have enormous discipline and organizational skills. Technology is changing the way people work in another way, in the use of cell phones. There is an advantage. Customers and clients have access to business people at any time, anywhere. However, there is also a drawback. Many business people don't want to be available day and night. They prefer to have a break from their work life. Workaholism. In the 21st century, workaholism will continue to be a fact of life for many workers. Workaholics are as addicted to their work as other people are to drugs or alcohol. This sounds like a problem, but it isn't always. Some people overwork but don't enjoy their work. They don't have time for their family, friends, or leisure activities, such as hobbies, sports, and movies. These people become tired, angry, and depressed. The tension and stress often cause physical symptoms, such as headaches. However, other people love their work and receive great pleasure from it. These people appear to be overworking, but are actually very happy. Psychologists tell us that the most successful people in the changing world of work are flexible, creative, disciplined, and passionate about their work. But they are also people who make time for relaxing activities and for other people. They enjoy their work and enjoy time away from it, too.
Page 81, Activity 2, Skimming for the topic and the main idea.
Looking for work in the 21st century. Not very long ago, when people needed to find a job, there were several possible steps. They might begin with a look through the classified ads in the newspaper. They could go to the personnel office at various companies and fill out an application. Or they could go to an employment agency. They could even find out about a job opening through word of mouth from another person who had heard about it. These days, job hunting is more complicated. The first step is to determine what kind of job you want, which sounds easier than it is, and make sure that you have the right education for it. Rapid changes in technology and science are creating many professions that never existed until recently. It is important to learn about them because one might be the perfect profession for you. The fastest growing areas for new jobs are in computer technology and health services. Jobs in these fields usually require specific skills, but you need to find out exactly which skills and which degrees are necessary. For example, it may be surprising to learn that in the sciences, an MS is more marketable than a PhD. In other words, there are more jobs available for people with a Master of Science degree than for people with a doctorate. However, people who want to do research still need a PhD. How do people learn about hot new professions? How do they discover their dream job? Many people these days go to a career counselor. In some countries, job hopping has become so common that career counseling is now big business. People sometimes spend large amounts of money for this advice. In Canada and the United States, high school and college students often have access to free vocational counseling services on campus. There is even a career organization, the 5 O'Clock Club, which helps members to set goals. Members focus on this question: what sort of person do you want to be years from now? The members then plan their careers around that goal. All career counselors, private or public, agree on one basic point. It is important for people to find a career that they love. Everyone should be able to think, "I'm having such a good time, I can't believe they're paying me to do this." After people have determined what their dream job is, they need to find it. The biggest change in job hunting these days is the use of the Internet. More and more employers are advertising job openings on their computer websites. More and more job hunters are applying for jobs online. There are also several thousand job boards, among them hotjobs.com, jobsjobsjobs.com, and monster.com. Some people think that online job hunting is only for people in technology fields, but this isn't true. Over 65% of online job seekers are from non-technical fields. Even truck drivers now find jobs on the Internet. So, how does this work? A job seeker can reply to a help wanted notice on a company's website. This person can also post his or her resume, page with information about education and work experience, on one or many of the online job boards. If a company is interested, the person still has to take the next step the old-fashioned way, actually go to the job interview and perhaps take a skills test. However, even this has changed. Now companies are able to give skills tests and do background checks online. But what about the interview? Companies are now able to interview the person by video chat, so people can interview for jobs in other cities or even other countries without leaving home. Clearly, job hunting is not what it used to be.
Chapter 5, Lifestyles Around the World, page 94, Activity 2, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns: balance, components, concept, essence, findings, gap, life expectancy, polls, solidarity, sum total, trend, well-being. Verbs: catch on, measure. Adjectives: complex, reasonable. Adverbs: actually, enthusiastically. Page 95, Activity 4, Reading an Article.
The science of happiness. How can we measure the happiness of a nation? What causes one nation to have greater well-being, more prosperity or happiness than another? Most economists use the GDP to compare various countries. The GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, is the value of all goods and services from a nation in 1 year. If we look at GDP, the top 5 countries in this order are the United States, China, Japan, Germany, and France. However, in recent years, there has been growing dissatisfaction with this measure. One drawback of using GDP is that disasters, such as storms and fires, and social ills, such as sickness and crime, actually improve a country's GDP because they cause an increase in economic activity. Also, GDP doesn't tell us if there is a big gap between the rich and poor in a country. And it certainly doesn't tell us if the people are happy. Increasingly, there is understanding that GDP is not enough of a measure of a nation's well-being. Human Development Index. Since 1993, the United Nations has used the HDI, or Human Development Index, to measure the well-being of a nation. Many people see the HDI as an improvement over the rigid GDP because it has 3 components instead of just one. The HDI measures income, average years of education, and life expectancy, or how long people can expect to live. Life expectancy is a good way to measure both people's basic health and the healthcare system in the country. According to the HDI, the top 5 countries in this order are Norway, Australia, the Netherlands, the United States, and New Zealand, quite different from the GDP rankings. What's missing from the HDI? Not everyone enthusiastically accepts the HDI, however. The National Bureau of Economic Research points out that the HDI does not include a measure of mental well-being, in other words, happiness. 2 researchers, Blanchflower and Oswald, point out that many areas of everyday life can influence a person's happiness: unemployment, the divorce rate, real income, friendship, traffic jams, crime, health, and much else. The HDI does not reflect most of these areas. Happiness and Bhutan. Back in 1972, an interesting idea came out of the tiny Himalayan country of Bhutan. Bhutan's king began to refer to the country's GNH, or Gross National Happiness. The idea is that happiness is far more complex than economic growth. This concept is now part of the constitution of Bhutan, and there are regular polls where people answer questions about their satisfaction in 9 areas of life, including a good balance of time at work and in leisure, psychological well-being, and a clean environment. The government makes decisions based on the results of these questionnaires. The spread of this concept. This concept of measuring GNH is catching on worldwide. In many countries, the use of happiness polls has become a trend, a general direction of change that is becoming common. In 2009, the 5th International Gross National Happiness Conference was held in Brazil. At such conferences, people discuss the various polls and their results. According to John DeGraff in Yes Magazine Online, year after year, such polls find that the countries with the highest levels of satisfaction are Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. What do these countries have in common? They all have a good work-life balance, a small gap in income between the rich and the poor, strong social solidarity, agreement among people, and strong social safety nets, ways to help people in difficult situations. These countries all have high taxes, too. Although these 4 countries have high income, the happiness polls also show that many poor countries, ones with a low GDP, have high life satisfaction. One of these is Costa Rica, where the average income is low, but where there is a high level of education and health care, and where there is passionate solidarity about the importance of the environment. A new measure. As this concept of GNH becomes more popular, there is an effort to find a new global measure for well-being. Various organizations have suggested ways to measure the well-being of nations instead of using the HDI. The proposal of the International Institute of Management, for example, is similar to the GNH poll in Bhutan, but they call it GNW, or Gross National Wellness. It measures 7 types of wellness: economic, environmental, physical, mental, workplace, social, and political. What happiness is and isn't. We have learned a lot in recent years about what makes a happy person or a happy nation. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, there are several characteristics. First, money does buy a reasonable amount of happiness. But for most people, having a higher income does not make as much of a difference as other life events, such as marriage. Second, nations do not seem to get happier as they get richer. Another finding is that happiness is U-shaped in age. This means that people are generally happy when they are young, then become less happy in middle age, but they become happier again as they get older. Finally, women usually report higher well-being than men, and more educated people report higher levels of happiness than people with less education. Conclusion. Clearly, some nations are happier than others. It is possible to measure the happiness of a nation, but it is challenging. Happiness is more complex than people used to think it was. Happiness does not seem to have an essence, a central quality. Instead, it is the sum total of many characteristics. One of these is money, but it is certainly not the most important one.
Page 101. Activity 2. Reading. Marking text when you read.
Happiness and the home. Most people would agree that true happiness usually includes a good home. Various languages have proverbs that support this, but what does home mean? A home is not only a house, a building. A home is both a physical space and all that we associate with it. It is family, security, comfort, beauty, food, and family history. Our personal identity, the qualities that make each person or group different from others, begins in the family home. Our well-being depends on our ability to return home. Today, many people live in modern apartments that are nearly identical, from Singapore to Stockholm. Does this mean that people in various cultures have the same concept of home? What exactly comes to mind when we think of home? Our idea of home comes partly from geography, because the land determines the building materials and the design. In the forested areas of Europe and North America, traditional houses are built of wood. In Central Africa, pygmies build labembe from plant materials. These temporary structures are appropriate for nomadic people who frequently move from place to place. In Mongolia, which has few trees, the traditional house is the gur, wooden poles covered with skins and textiles. The Mongols, too, are nomadic and need portable houses, but their gur must also protect them from the harsh winter weather. The white color of the gur is important to the people because in their language, tsagan means both white and happy. In southern Greece, too, traditional village houses are always white, but built of stone. When Greeks moved to cities or other countries into modern apartment buildings, their idea of home is often the traditional village of their grandparents, which they might visit only at holiday time. There is an almost universal association of home with the hearth, the fireplace or area in front of the fireplace. Fire is essential in all cultures. It brings security and comfort and allows us to cook our food. On a cold winter night in Japan, a family in a traditional house gathers around the kotatsu, a heater under a low table. There is a blanket over the table, and the family sits with the blanket over their legs. Here they talk, drink tea, read, do homework, and keep warm. However, even in Central Africa, where the weather is not so cold, the pygmy people see fire as essential to their survival. Although they have a deep knowledge of the forest around them, they have a terrible fear of elephants and believe that fire keeps these animals away. In all cultures, though, people associate the hearth with food, and this usually means the kitchen. This room is often seen as the emotional center of the house. Is this why at a party in a New York apartment, people begin in the living room but often end up gathering in the kitchen? Clearly, a hearth is more than it might seem. Interestingly, in English, the word hearth has an additional symbolic meaning: home. Home can also be an expression of personal identity. The choice of colors, furniture, art, photos, carpets, and tchotchkes, those small items that many of us collect, is unique to each person. These days, the idea of home can even include spaces on the internet where people can create a home online. This is expanding the concept, making home not just a physical and emotional place, but also a virtual one. Wherever it is, whatever it is, home is the place where many people are the most secure, comfortable, relaxed, and possibly the happiest.
Chapter 6, Global Connections. Page 118. Activity 2, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns. Benefit. Consumer. Extinction. Fuel. Livestock. Nutrients. Obstacle. Shift. Staples. Verbs. Contribute. Shift. Adjectives. Endangered. Processed. Adverb. Approximately. Expression. In turn. Page 118, Activity 4, Reading an Article.
We often hear about the world's changing diet, and we think of this as a modern concept, but in a sense, the human diet has always been changing. The banana, for example, whose origins appear to be in the region that today is Malaysia, traveled to India, where Alexander the Great first tasted it. His soldiers brought it back to Greece in about 350 BC. The potato had been grown in South America for thousands of years before the Spanish brought it back to Europe in 1570. Increasing travel and trade, in turn, took both the banana and the potato to all corners of the world. It is true, however, that globalization is changing our diet faster than ever before. Our diet today. In several ways, our modern diet differs from that of our great-great-grandparents. Today, we have access to more kinds of foods from other countries. The favorite food of many people worldwide? Pizza. These days, we also have more fast foods and more takeout foods than in the past. More people are moving to urban areas, where they spend a lot of time both working and commuting to work, so there is less time to cook. Buying fast food and takeout food saves consumers time, and it also saves the cost of cooking fuel. Another change in the modern diet is a shift from traditional staples, basic important foods, to more processed foods, which have chemicals or colorings added to preserve them, improve the taste, or make them look attractive. In many countries, foods that were staples in the past, such as tubers and root vegetables, are often replaced by rice, and rice, in turn, is replaced by wheat products, like ready-made bread, which doesn't have as many nutrients as the traditional tubers. Loss of variety. Visit an international food court in almost any country, and it might seem that we have a greater variety of foods than in the past. You'll find foods from Mexico, Thailand, Japan, Italy, India, Korea, China, the United States, and so on. Our great-great-grandparents did not have access to so many cuisines. Surprisingly, though, there are far fewer varieties of many foods than in the past. Imagine, our great-great-grandparents may have tasted types of rice, corn, potatoes, or bananas that we will never experience. For example, according to primalseeds.org, there were 8,000 traditional varieties of rice in China in 1949. By 1970, there were only 50. In the Philippines, too, thousands of kinds of rice have been lost. Mexico has lost approximately 80% of its varieties of maize. There are also thousands of other food crops, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and honey, and varieties of livestock, such as sheep and chickens, that are on the path to extinction. Unlike our ancestors, we might never have the opportunity to taste Melipona bee honey from Argentina, a Masakari pumpkin from Japan, a Ribera vanilla orange from Italy, or Dominique chicken from the United States. As Jeff Bentley of the BBC puts it, our generation is killing ancient crops which fed the Incas, the Mayans, the Sumerians, and the Tang dynasty. Causes of disappearing varieties. Why are varieties of so many foods disappearing worldwide? The key reason is that farmers are replacing traditional varieties with modern ones, partly because these modern varieties are popular, and partly because they are easy to ship to distant countries. Big industrial agriculture contributes to the problem. Huge international companies are buying small family farms and shifting to newer and fewer crops, but in great quantities. According to the Rainforest Conservation Fund, in the past, agriculture in different regions of the world was independent and local. Now, however, much of it has become part of the global exchange economy. The seed industry contributes to the problem too. Much of the seed that farmers plant is now produced by only 3 huge companies, and they sell only a few varieties. The difficulty of finding a variety of seeds is an obstacle to farmers who want to plant traditional crops. The story of 2 crops. Why should we be concerned? 2 crops, the potato and the banana, illustrate the root of the problem. In the 19th century, much of Europe, especially poor people, became dependent on potatoes as their main food source. However, only a few of the thousands of varieties of potato in the Americas had been introduced in Europe. When a terrible plant disease swept through Western Ireland in 1845, the potato crop failed. There was no other healthy variety to replace it. Over the next 7 years, approximately 1 million people died of starvation. Hunger drove over 1 million more to emigrate from Ireland. Today, industrial agriculture might be causing a similar problem with the banana. There are about 300 varieties of banana, but in much of the world, people have access to exactly one, the Cavendish. If disease sweeps through the Cavendish crop, people in many countries will no longer have bananas on their breakfast table. Localization, the solution. It's not too late, however, to save some of these endangered crops. The Buy Local movement is encouraging people to support farmers near their home. These are farmers who often grow less common varieties of food. An additional benefit for consumers at farmers' markets is that the food is fresh and full of nutrients because it hasn't been shipped around the world. Also, a priority of several organizations, such as the Slow Food Foundation, is to collect seeds of endangered varieties and encourage local farmers to plant them. If they are successful, we have hope that one day we will be able to taste forgotten flavors, such as a shellac apricot or a Saskatoon berry.
End of CD 1.
Page 126, Activity 2, Skimming for Main Ideas.
Life in a Fishbowl, Globalization and Reality TV. Increasingly, we have a rich global culture in which countries influence each other's food, music, education, technology, fashion, and entertainment. One popular form of entertainment that has spread to all corners of the world is reality TV. It's not clear when and where reality TV actually began. Perhaps its roots are in the 1970s TV series called An American Family, which followed a real California family through several years of daily life and explored topics that had been taboo before then, such as divorce. For the family members, it was life in a fishbowl. They gave up their privacy. Anyone with a TV in the U.S. could watch the smallest details of their lives, details that were often embarrassing and sometimes tragic. However, the concept of reality TV as we know it today probably began in the 1990s with several European TV shows. These shows took real people and put them in difficult situations to see what would happen. And this is the essence of reality TV. The most typical reality TV shows are competitions. They combine elements of several kinds of TV programs, game shows, talent shows, and drama. Idol, originally from Britain, is a combination of a talent show and a singing competition. There are elements of drama, too, as the audience learns about the life stories of the contestants. Some of these stories are real tearjerkers. Judges select the contestants, and audience members at home choose the winner. Survivor from Sweden, where it was called Expedition Robinson, sends teams of contestants, tribes, to rough it in out-of-the-way tropical locations. It tests their ability to survive with very few or no tools and almost no food. Contestants vote each week to decide who gets kicked out. On Fear Factor, which began in the Netherlands, contestants battle each other by doing extremely dangerous stunts, such as you see in movies. Other stunts don't involve danger, but do involve something disgusting or painful: swallowing live insects, sitting in a tub of snakes, walking on broken glass with bare feet, and so on. It goes without saying that there is a good deal of drama on this program. Have you ever seen a reality TV program? Chances are you have. If you haven't, at least you've heard about such shows because they're spreading like wildfire. Versions of the original shows now exist in many countries on all continents. For example, you can see Canadian Idol, Malaysian Idol, Vietnam Idol, Nouvelle Star, France, Super Idol in the Arab world, or World Idol, well, everywhere. In an attempt to localize the concept, some countries have created programs that follow the same format: contestants who overcome difficulties in competing for a prize, but are specific to that culture. There was Australian Princess, for example, which trained 12 young Australian women to handle themselves in the highest of society if they were ever to become a royal. There was Space Korea, which shows the first Korean astronaut. And in the United States, there was The Biggest Loser, which taught overweight people about healthy diets and put them through hours of daily exercise. Some programs that were aimed at local audiences, though, quickly became popular in other countries too. For example, The Biggest Loser now has versions in the Arab world, Asia, and Scandinavia, among other areas. It seems that local can become global very quickly in today's world. Will we soon see Brazilian Princess or Space Norway? Back in the 1970s, you could follow the intimate details in the life of one California family, but only for 1 hour each week, and you had to be sitting in front of a TV in the United States. Today, in Canada, Global Reality Channel provides round-the-clock programming of many popular reality TV shows. And anywhere in the world, if you have access to the Internet, you can watch almost anything. For example, Ultimate Cheapsters was an Internet series for college students in the difficult economic times of 2011 to 2012. Contestants were challenged to see how little money they could spend on food, clothing, and rent. They fought tooth and nail to be the ultimate cheapster, the person who spent the least money. Another trend in reality shows is toward 24/7 live broadcasts. No series does this better than Big Brother, in which a group of people lives for several months in a house with cameras, following their every action and every word. There are versions of Big Brother in 81 countries. Viewers who want more than an hour a week, or an hour each evening, can now subscribe monthly and watch any time, day or night, on their TV, computer, or cell phone. Even as the participants in the house are sleeping, The cameras are not. Today, the internet and social media make it possible for just about anyone to be a producer of a sort of reality show. Anyone can post a video on YouTube. Anyone can create a blog. Sometimes these catch on and go viral, become wildly popular. What explains the huge popularity of reality TV? On the surface, it might seem that it allows viewers an escape into fantasy, drama, and rags-to-riches stories. It also gives people something to talk about with their friends or coworkers. If we dig deeper, though, psychological research suggests darker reasons. It appears that many viewers of reality shows are competitive, with a desire for high status. Is it possible that they confuse status with fame? After all, contestants on reality programs are ordinary people who become suddenly famous. Perhaps many viewers imagine that they, too, could become celebrities if they were on such a show. Other research suggests that people who watch reality TV place a high value on revenge, punishment for doing harm. Do they enjoy watching the failure of a contestant whom they greatly dislike? It's quite possible. When a contestant's character flaws, faults or imperfections in their basic nature, lead to their failure, for example, they are voted off the island and lose the competition, it is the essence of drama and of tragedy. The desire to see the good guy win and the bad guy lose seems to reflect universal human values.
Page 143, Activity 4, Reading an Article.
If we could talk with animals. In a famous children's story, Dr. Dolittle is able to talk to and understand animals. This has long been a dream of many people, to be able to communicate with animals and know what they're thinking. For almost as long, scientists have wondered if animals actually have language. It seems clear to anyone who has a dog or cat, or who closely observes animals, that there is certainly communication going on. But how do animals communicate? What do they say? And is it truly language? Recent research into everything from ants to chimpanzees is shedding light on animal communication. The language of smell. Many animals produce chemicals called pheromones, which send smell messages to other animals of the same species. These odors have different meanings. One odor attracts a mate. Another sends a warning. Another marks a territory. A honeybee, for example, makes over 36 different pheromones to communicate such information as where to find good flowers. An ant that has found food will take a bit of it and then head back home to the anthill. As it carries the food, it wipes its stomach on the ground. This leaves a chemical trail or path so that other ants will know where to go for more food. Body language. Just as humans do, animals communicate with body language and sometimes gestures. In addition to using odors, for example, a honeybee uses its entire body in a complex dance to give other bees exact directions to flowers. A dog expresses happiness by wagging his tail, as most people know. But what is the dog in the photo saying? His stomach is on the ground, his rear end is up in the air, and his tail is wagging. This means, I want to play. Chimpanzees in the wild communicate a wide variety of gestures and facial expressions, as we learn from the research of primatologist Jane Goodall. To express anger, for example, a chimp stands upright on two legs, moves with a swagger, a proud walk, swinging from side to side, and waves her arms or throws branches. A nervous chimp who is afraid of a more powerful chimp will lower himself to the ground. Then he either holds out his hand or shows his rear end to the other chimp. Interestingly, when a chimp smiles, it is not a smile of happiness. Instead, it is an expression similar to the nervous, fearful grin that a human makes in a tense or stressful situation. A powerful chimp will reassure a nervous, fearful chimp by touching, hugging, or kissing him. Vocalizations. Like humans, many animals vocalize, but we are only beginning to understand the meaning of these sounds. As they move through the ocean, some whales make use of echolocation. First, they make clicking noises that travel through the water as sound waves. When these sound waves encounter an object, such as a boat, or prey, such as fish, they rebound or echo. The whales use these echoes to locate and identify the objects the echoes are bouncing from, even in cloudy water where it's difficult to see. Some whales also produce mysterious songs. These are probably calls to communicate with other members of their pod or group and to know where each member is. So far, we don't know much more than that. Research into whale communication is especially difficult because different populations of whales have different songs, even if those whales are of the same species. We have a better understanding of the chatter of prairie dogs. A professor at Northern Arizona University, Kon Slobodchikov, has spent over 10 years studying one colony of prairie dogs in the wild. He records their sounds. He also carefully observes their actions and all events that happen at the same time as the sounds. He then feeds the data into a computer. The computer puts together the chatter, the talking, and the actions. By utilizing the computer in this way, Slobodchikov claims that he has identified about 50 words. So what are these prairie dogs talking about? They often alert each other when they spot danger from such creatures as a human, dog, or coyote. Surprisingly, in their chatter, they can apparently distinguish shapes, colors, and sizes. They might say, for example, "There's a tall blue human coming from the north," about a person wearing blue clothes. Slobodchikov believes that they can distinguish gender, a man from a woman, and a dog from a coyote. Their chatter also varies according to the degree of danger. Is this creature very dangerous, or just something to be careful about? The use of symbols by dolphins. Many scientists wonder about animals' capacity to understand a system of symbols, such as language. At the University of Hawaii, studies with dolphins have been going on since 1979. Researchers are teaching these ocean mammals a language of hand signals that includes nouns, ball, basket, pipe, adjectives, big, small, red, directions, left, right, verbs, go, take, and prepositions, in, under. The dolphins prove that they understand by following commands such as go to the ball on your right and take it to the basket. There is even clear evidence that dolphins understand the grammatical difference between subjects and objects. The head of the research program, Dr. Lewis Herman, says that with a vocabulary of about 50 words, the dolphins demonstrate their intelligence by following new commands that they have never before experienced or practiced. The use of symbols by primates. Since the 1970s, other researchers have been studying the capacity for language among primates, especially among chimpanzees. Because chimps don't have vocal organs that allow them to form spoken words, researchers decided to teach them other types of language. One of the earliest subjects, a chimp named Washoe, began to learn ASL, American Sign Language, the hand signals of deaf Americans, when she was less than a year old. By age 4, she understood and used 132 ASL signs. In other studies, Researchers have been communicating with chimps by using a keyboard with special symbols called lexicograms. One chimp named Kanzi picked up this language naturally. In other words, he watched as people tried unsuccessfully to teach this language to his mother. How much can chimps understand? And what can they do with these words? They understand the difference between take the potato outdoors and go outdoors and get the potato. They understand adjectives such as good, funny, hungry, and stupid. They can combine words into short sentences. You, me, out, or me banana, you banana, me you give. Perhaps most interestingly, they can coin new words or phrases when they don't know a word. For example, water bird for a swan and green banana for a cucumber. And they can express emotion, me sad. Language? But is this language? What distinguishes communication from true language? Do chimps actually have the capacity for language? There is much disagreement about this. Some people argue that chimps can acquire the vocabulary of only a 2.5-year-old human. They also point out that a sentence such as Lana tomorrow scare Snake River monster is not exactly Shakespearean English. It goes without saying that there is a gap between the language ability of chimps and humans. But clearly, this gap is not as wide as we used to think it was. Recent research is now focusing on the structures and activity of the brain. Biologists have looked at one small area of the brain, the planum temporale, which humans use to understand and produce language. In chimps, this is larger on the left side of the brain than on the right. In the journal Science, researchers tell us that this is essentially identical to the planum temporale in humans. This is not surprising to people who believe that chimps do have the capacity for language. After all, they say 99% of the genetic material in chimps and humans is identical, making chimps our closest relative. Conclusions. It is clear, then, that animals certainly communicate in various ways. However, the question, is it language, is still open. The famous linguist Noam Chomsky believed that what distinguishes communication from true language is syntax, that is, the use of grammar and word order. So he believed that only humans can have language. However, now we know that some animals, dolphins, chimps, have at least simple syntax. Lewis Herman suggests some people think of language like pregnancy. You either have it or you don't. But he and other researchers prefer to see language as a continuum of skills. In other words, some animals simply have more than others.
Page 152, Activity 2, Identifying the Main Ideas.
Parentese. Who talks more, men or women? Most people believe that women talk more. However, linguist Deborah Tannen, who has studied the communication style of men and women, says that this is a stereotype. According to Tannen, women are more verbal or talk more in private situations, where they use conversation as the glue to hold relationships together. But, she says, men talk more in public situations, where they use conversation to exchange information and gain status. Tannen points out that we can see these differences even in children. Little girls often play with one best friend. Their play includes a lot of conversation. Little boys often play games in groups. Their play usually involves more doing than talking. In school, girls are often better at verbal skills. Boys are often better at mathematics. A recent study at Emory University helps to shed light on the roots of this difference. Researchers studied conversation between children aged 3 to 6 and their parents. They found evidence that parents talked very differently to their sons than they do to their daughters. The startling conclusion was that parents use far more language with their girls. Specifically, when parents talk with their daughters, they use more descriptive language and more details. There is also far more talk about emotions, especially sadness, with daughters than with sons. Most parents would be surprised to learn this. They certainly don't plan to talk more with one child than with another. They don't even realize that this is happening. So why do they do it? Interestingly, it begins when the children are newborn babies. It is a known fact that at birth, males are a little less developed than females are. They don't vocalize or make noises as much as girls do, and they don't have as much eye contact. Female babies vocalize, look at their parents, and remain alert longer. The result? Parents respond by talking more to the baby girls, who seem to be paying attention and talking back to them. Apparently, then, biology determines the amount of language that parents use. There is always this question: what determines our character, personality, and behavior? Nature, biology, or nurture, environment, and education? The research with babies seems to suggest that nature causes the amount and quality of language use. However, a study from the University of California at Santa Cruz provides evidence that the situation or context also influences the conversation. For example, parents usually give gender-stereotyped toys to their children. A boy gets a car that he can take apart and put back together, for instance. A girl gets a toy grocery store. The type of talk depends on the toy the child is playing with. A toy grocery store naturally involves more conversation than a take-apart car does. If we consider this, we might decide that nurture determines language ability because we choose which toys to give our children. Campbell Leeper, a researcher at the University of California, believes that the choice of toys is important. Both boys and girls, he says, need task-oriented toys, such as take-apart cars. With these toys, they practice the language that they will need as adults in work situations. Both boys and girls also need social interactive toys, such as a grocery store. With these toys, they practice the kind of conversation that is necessary in relationships with friends and family. The data suggest that biology does not have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Leeper concludes that verbal ability is the result of both nature and nurture. Parents might naturally respond to their baby's biology, but they can choose a variety of toys and can choose how to talk with this child.
Chapter 8. Tastes and Preferences. Page 171. Activity 2. Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns. Archaeologists. Architecture. Armor. Calligraphy. Caravan. Caves. Destination. Documents. Fabric. Frescoes. Mausoleums. Merchants. Mosques. Network. Oasis. Pitcher. Silk. Spices. Statues. Verbs. Decorated. Depict. Flowered. Spread. Adjectives. Exquisite. Fertility. Holy. Significant. Vast.
Expression. To this end. Page 171. Activity 4. Reading the article.
The Silk Road, Art and Archaeology. Cross-cultural evidence. In the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, which was destroyed by a volcano in the year 79 CE, a mirror was found. It had an ivory handle in the shape of a female fertility goddess. The mirror was from India. In the tomb of Li Zhan, a Chinese military official who died in 569 CE, archaeologists found a water pitcher in the shape of a vase. The pitcher had a combination of different styles. The shape was from Persia, today's Iran. Many details were from Central Asia, and the figures on the side were Greek stories from the Trojan War. In the Japanese city of Nara, the 8th century Shojin treasure house holds thousands of exquisite objects of great beauty: furniture, musical instruments, weapons, fabric, and military armor. These objects come from what is today Vietnam, Western China, Iraq, the Roman Empire, and Egypt. Clearly, long before the globalization of our modern world, trade was going on between very distant lands, and the objects tell a story about a place and time. What was the Silk Road? From ancient times, cultures have influenced each other along the famous Silk Road, although it was not truly one continuous road. Instead, it was a 5,000-mile series or network of trails that connected East Asia to the Mediterranean. In ancient times, it was never called the Silk Road. The term Silk Road was coined in the 19th century by a German explorer. He was thinking of one of the goods that people in the West found especially desirable: silk fabric from China. For centuries, the Chinese kept as a secret the way in which silk is produced. They exchanged this fabric for Mediterranean glass, whose production was also kept secret by the Romans. However, merchants also moved many other goods along these trade routes: spices, such as cinnamon, musical instruments, tea, valuable stones, wool, linen, and other fabrics. Ideas and knowledge also moved along the Silk Road. Travelers to foreign regions took with them ideas about art, architecture, styles of living, and religion. In a sense, there were two Silk Roads: the literal, historical one and the figurative one. The historical network of trails was used from approximately 100 BCE until the 16th century CE. Almost nobody actually made a complete trip from one end to the other. Instead, merchants used to carry goods along one section of the road and sell them to other merchants at an oasis in the desert or a town in the mountains. These merchants, in turn, took the goods to the next stop, and so on. The figurative Silk Road is a symbol of the cross-cultural exchange of knowledge. This continues even today. In short, the Silk Road was the way that goods and ideas moved across a vast area of Asia and Eastern Europe. Art, religion, and the Silk Road. Art and architecture reflect the movement of religion from region to region. At various times, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, among other religions, spread along the Silk Road. Buddhism and Islam were an especially significant influence. Buddhism moved north and east from India, beginning in the 4th century CE. When Buddhism entered China, the Buddhist love of painting and statues moved with it. However, there was at least one change in style. The bare chest of the figure on the Buddha in India was not considered proper by the Chinese, who created figures of the Buddha wearing a robe. As in many religions worldwide, caves deep inside mountains seem to have been important holy places for Buddhists. For example, in Dunhuang, China, a desert oasis far from towns or cities, Buddhists dug a series of caves and decorated them with exquisite frescoes, wall paintings, and statues. In these caves, called mogaoku in Chinese, the frescoes are not all religious. Many depict scenes of daily life. Also, evidence of some of the many Silk Road cultures was discovered. In one cave, documents were found that were written in 5 languages: Chinese, Uyghur, Sogdian, Tibetan, and Sanskrit. The spread of Islam toward the East in the 7th century CE contributed to the disappearance of some art, but the creation of other art. Islam played a role in the destruction of many Buddhist statues because the Quran, the Book of Islam, taught that images of humans were unholy. However, during this period, Islamic art and architecture flowered in many areas along the Silk Road. For example, in Samarkand, in what is Uzbekistan today, the military leader Timur built mosques for Islamic religious worship, mausoleums in which to bury the dead, and palaces. The creators of such buildings followed Islamic law by decorating them with arabesques, exquisite designs of great beauty with images of flowers, geometric forms, such as circles, squares, and triangles, and Arabic calligraphy, or writing. In brief, it is possible to follow the rise and fall of religions by studying the art and architecture along the Silk Road. A question of time, 2 views. Most historians have dated the Silk Road from about 100 BCE, when the Chinese Emperor Wu Di first sent a representative, General Zhang Quan, with a caravan of 100 men on a long, dangerous trip. His destination was the Western Territories. Zhang returned 13 years later with only 1 of his men, but with much information. Recent discoveries, however, shed light on a period long before this. These discoveries suggest that people were on the move and trading goods as early as 1000 BCE. Archaeologists have found tombs of people in the Taklamakan Desert in Central Asia, in what is today the northwestern region of China. The dry, salty earth preserved the people's bodies and the goods that were buried with them in these tombs. We have learned that these people had horses and sheep. They ate bread, although wheat did not grow in this area. They had cowrie shells from the ocean, although the region is landlocked. They wore brightly colored clothing. They wore leather boots and wool pants. Some were tall. A woman was 6 feet tall, 1.83 meters, and a man 6 feet 6 inches, 1.98 meters. Perhaps most astonishing, they had long noses and reddish hair, and the men wore beards. Thus, archaeologists are beginning to ask, were people moving along the Silk Road long before we thought they were? The Silk Road today. Today, there is new interest in the history and culture of the Silk Road, which the famous Chinese-American musician Yo-Yo Ma has called the Internet of Antiquity. New technology is helping us to learn more about this ancient internet. Special radar on the space shuttle allows archaeologists to see objects and ruined cities 1 to 2 meters under the dry desert sand, for example. Tourists now come from all over the world to follow the old trade routes. And people with a love of art and culture want to make sure that the customs in the vast region do not die out as the world modernizes. To this end, Yo-Yo Ma has founded the Silk Road Project, which encourages the living arts of these traditional lands. The result is that the people along the ancient Silk Road continue to learn from each other.
Page 180, Activity 1, Identifying the topic and main idea.
Fashion, the art of the body. The enormous and fascinating variety of clothing, may express a person's status or social position. Several hundred years ago in Europe, Japan, and China, there were many highly detailed sumptuary laws, that is, strict regulations concerning how each social class could dress. In Europe, for example, only royal families could wear fur, purple silk, or gold cloth. In Japan, a farmer could breed silkworms, but he couldn't wear silk. In many societies, a lack of clothing indicated an absence of status. In ancient Egypt, for instance, children who had no social status wore no clothes until they were about 12. These days, in most societies, especially in the West, rank or status is exhibited through regulation of dress only in the military, where the appearance or absence of certain metal buttons or stars signifies the dividing line between ranks. With the exception of the military, the divisions between different classes of society are becoming less clear. The clientele of a Paris cafe, for example, might include both working-class people and members of the highest society. But how can one tell the difference when everyone is wearing denim jeans? 3 common types of body decoration are mehndi, tattooing, and scarification. Mehndi is the art of applying dye, usually dark orange or dark brown, to the skin of women in Hindu and Islamic cultures in southern Asia and in Africa. The dye comes from the henna plant and is applied in a beautiful design that varies from culture to culture. Fine, thin lines in India and large flower patterns in the Arab world, for example. A tattoo is also a design or mark made with a kind of dye, usually dark blue. However, unlike henna, it is put into a cut in the skin. In scarification, found mainly in Africa, dirt or ashes are put into the cuts instead of dye. The result is a design that is unique to the person's tribe. 3 lines on each side of a man's face identify him as a member of the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria, for example. A complex geometric design on a woman's back identifies her as Nuba from Sudan, and also makes her more beautiful in the eyes of her people. In the 1990s, tattooing became popular among youth in urban Western societies. Unlike people in tribal cultures, these young people had no tradition of tattooing, except among sailors and criminals. To these young people, the tattoos were beautiful and were sometimes also a sign of rebellion against older, more conservative people in the culture. These days, tattooing has become common and is usually not symbolic of rebellion. In some societies, women overeat to become plump because large women are considered beautiful, while skinny women are regarded as unattractive. A woman's plumpness is also an indication of her family's wealth. In other societies, by contrast, a fat person is considered unattractive, so men and women eat little and try to remain slim. In many parts of the world, people lie in the sun for hours to darken their skin, while in other places, light, soft skin is seen as attractive. People with gray hair often dye it black, whereas those with naturally dark hair often change its color to blonde or green or purple. In most modern cultures, many people visit a dentist regularly for both hygiene and beauty. They use toothpaste and dental floss daily to keep their teeth clean. They have their teeth straightened, whitened, and crowned to make them more attractive to others in their culture. However, attractive has had quite a different meaning in the past and in some cultures today. In the past, in Japan, it was the custom for women to blacken, not whiten, the teeth. People in some areas of Africa and Central Australia have the custom of filing the teeth to sharp points. And among the Makalolo people of Malawi, the women wear a very large ring, a pelele, in their upper lip. As their chief once explained about peleles, they are the only beautiful things women have. Men have beards, women have none. What kind of person would she be without the pelele? She would not be a woman at all. While some people in modern urban societies think of tribal lip rings as unattractive and even disgusting, Other people, in Tokyo or New York or Rome, might choose to wear a small lip ring or to pierce their tongue and wear a ring through the hole. Body paint or face paint is used mostly by men in pre-literate societies in order to attract good health or to ward off disease. Anthropologists explain that it is a form of magic protection against the dangers of the world outside the village, where men have to go for the hunt or for war. When it is used as war paint, it also serves to frighten the enemy, distinguish members of one's own group from the enemy, and give the men a sense of identity, of belonging to the group. Women in these societies have less need of body or face paint because they usually stay in the safety of the village. Women in Victorian society, in England and the United States, were expected to wear little or no makeup. They were excluded from public life and therefore didn't need protection from the outside world. In modern societies, however, cosmetics are used mostly by women, who often feel naked, unclothed, without makeup when out in public, like a tribal hunter without his war paint.
Chapter 9, New Frontiers. Page 200, Activity 4. Previewing vocabulary.
Nouns. Blood vessels. Colleagues. Hemispheres. Insights. Intuition. Logic. Maturation. Maturity. Memory. Neuroscientists. Origins. Toxins. Wiring. Verbs. Rotate. Adjectives. Cognitive. Exposed. Logical. Mature. Precise. Repressed. Expression. Going into training.
Page 200, Activity 5. Reading an article.
The human brain. New discoveries. Most of us learn basic facts about the human brain in our middle or high school biology classes. We study the subcortex, the old brain, which is found in the brains of most animals and is responsible for basic functions such as breathing, eating, drinking, and sleeping. We learn about the neocortex, the new brain, which is unique to humans and is where complex brain activity takes place. We find that the cerebrum, which is responsible for all active thought, is divided into two parts or hemispheres. The left hemisphere generally manages the right side of the body. It is responsible for logical thinking. The right hemisphere manages the left side of the body. This hemisphere controls emotional, creative, and artistic functions. And we learn that the corpus callosum is the bridge that connects the two hemispheres. Memorizing the names for parts of the brain might not seem thrilling to many students, but new discoveries in brain function are exciting. Recent research is shedding light on creativity, memory, maturity, gender, and the possibility of changing the brain. Left brain, right brain, creativity. Psychologists agree that most of us have creative ability that is greater than what we use in daily life. In other words, we can be more creative than we realize. The problem is that we use mainly one hemisphere of our brain, the left. From childhood, in school, we're taught reading, writing, and mathematics. We are exposed to very little music or art. Therefore, many of us might not exercise our right hemisphere much, except through dreams, symbols, and those wonderful insights in which we suddenly find the answer to a problem that has been bothering us, and do so without the need for logic. Can we be taught to use our right hemisphere more? Many experts believe so. Classes at some schools and books, such as The Inner Game of Tennis and Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, claim to help people to silence the left hemisphere and give the right a chance to work. Memory, true or false? In the 1980s, in the United States, there were many cases of adults who suddenly remembered, with the help of a psychologist, things that had happened to them in childhood. These memories had been repressed, held back for many years. Some of these newly discovered memories have sent people to prison. As people remember crimes, such as murder or rape, that they saw or experienced as children, the police have reopened and investigated old criminal cases. In fact, over 700 cases have been filed that are based on these repressed memories. However, studies in the 1990s suggested that many of these might be false memories. At a 1994 conference at Harvard Medical School, neuroscientists discussed how memory is believed to work. It is known that small pieces of a memory, sound, sight, feeling, and so on, are kept in different parts of the brain. The limbic system, in the middle of the brain, pulls these pieces together into one complete memory. But it's certain that people can remember things that have never happened. Even a small suggestion can leave a piece of memory in the brain. Most frightening, according to Dr. Michael Nash of the University of Tennessee, is that there may be no structural difference in the brain between a false memory and a true one. The teen brain. Parents of teenagers have always known that there is something, different about the teen years. Some parents claim that their teenage children belong to a different species. Unfortunately, neuroscience did not support this belief. The traditional belief was that by the time a child was 8 to 12, the brain was completely mature. However, very recent studies provide evidence that the brain of a teenager differs from that of both children and adults. According to Jay Geed of the National Institute of Mental Health, maturation does not stop at age 10, but continues into the teen years and beyond. In fact, Geed and his colleagues found that the corpus callosum continues growing into your 20s. Because, it is believed, the corpus callosum is involved in self-awareness and intelligence, the new studies imply that teens may not be as fully self-aware or as intelligent as they will be later. Other researchers at McLean Hospital in Massachusetts have found that teenagers are not as able as adults are to read emotions on people's faces. Differences in male and female brains. Watch a group of children as they play. You'll probably notice that the boys and girls play differently, speak differently, and are interested in different things. When they grow into men and women, the differences do not disappear. Many scientists are now studying the origins of these gender differences. Some are searching for an explanation in the human brain. Some of their findings are interesting. For example, they've found that more men than women are left-handed. This reflects the dominance of the brain's right hemisphere. By contrast, more women listen equally with both ears, while men listen mainly with the right ear. Men are better at reading a map without having to rotate it. Women are better at reading the emotions of people in photographs. One place to look for an explanation of gender differences is in the hypothalamus, just above the brainstem. This controls anger, thirst, hunger, and sexual desire. One recent study shows that there is a region in the hypothalamus that is larger in heterosexual men than it is in women and homosexual men. Another area of study is the corpus callosum, the thick group of nerves that allows the right and left hemispheres of the brain to communicate with each other. The corpus callosum is larger in women than in men. This might explain the mystery of female intuition, which is supposed to give women greater ability to read and understand emotional clues. A change of mind? We all know the expression, to change your mind, but is it possible literally to change your mind? Or, to be more precise, to change your brain? Reports from 2005 say yes. First, the bad news, at least for smokers. A study from the University of Aberdeen and the University of Edinburgh in Scotland concludes that smoking makes people less intelligent. On cognitive tests, that is, tests that involve judgment, smokers did significantly worse than non-smokers. The theory is that toxins, poisons, in the smoke enter the blood and damage blood vessels providing the brain with oxygen. And there is more bad news for most of us. A study from the University of London says that infomania, The constant flood of information from cell phones, emails, and text messaging can reduce intelligence by 10 points on an IQ test. However, there is also good news. Meditation seems to change the wiring in the brain in several positive ways. In a study that compared the brains of 8 lifelong Buddhist meditators who work with the Dalai Lama and the brains of beginning meditators, scientists discovered that there were significant differences. The expert meditators had higher levels of gamma brain waves, which improve memory, learning, and concentration. Meditation appears to do for the brain what physical training does for the body. The researcher Richard Davidson said, "The trained mind, or brain, is physically different from the untrained one." Perhaps we should consider going into training.
Page 205, Activity 1. Identifying the main idea by analyzing details.
Personality, nature or nurture? The nature-nurture question is not a new one. Its roots go back at least several hundred years. In the 1600s, the British philosopher John Locke wrote that a newborn infant was a blank slate on which his or her education and experience would be written. In other words, Locke believed that environment alone determined each person's identity. In the 1700s, the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau claimed that natural characteristics were more important. Today, we realize that both play a role. The question now is, to what degree? To answer this question, researchers are studying identical twins, especially those who grew up in different environments. Jim Lewis and Jim Springer are identical twins who were separated 5 weeks after birth. They grew up in different families and didn't know about each other's existence. They were reunited at the age of 39. It is not surprising that they were physically alike, the same dark hair, the same height and weight. They both had high blood pressure and very bad headaches. But they also moved in the same way and made the same gestures. They both hated baseball. They both drank the same brand of beer, drove the same make of car, and spent their vacations on the same small beach in Florida. They had both married women named Linda, gotten divorced, and then married women named Betty. Studies of these and other separated twins indicate that genetics, biology, plays a significant role in determining personal characteristics and behavior. Various research centers are studying identical twins in order to discover the heritability of behavioral characteristics. That is, the degree to which a trait is due to genes, nature, instead of environment. They have reached some startling conclusions. One study found, for example, that optimism and pessimism are both very much influenced by genes, but only optimism is affected by environment too. According to another study, genes influence our coffee consumption, but not consumption of tea. Anxiety, nervousness, and worry seems to be 40 to 50% heritable. Another study tells us that happiness does not depend much on money or love or professional success. Instead, it is 80% heritable. Among the traits that appear to be largely heritable are shyness, attraction to danger, thrill-seeking, choice of career, and religious belief. It is not easy to discover the genes that influence personality. The acid that carries genetic information in every human cell, DNA, contains just 4 chemicals: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. But a single gene is spelled out by perhaps 1 million combinations. As the Human Genome Project, which provided a map of human genes, was nearing completion in the spring of 2000, there were a number of newspaper headlines about specific discoveries: gene linked to anxiety, gay gene, and thrill-seeking due to genetics. The newspaper articles led people to believe that a single gene is responsible for a certain personality trait in the same way a single gene can be responsible for a physical characteristic or disease. However, One gene alone cannot cause people to become anxious or homosexual or thrill-seeking. Instead, many genes work together, and they direct the combination of chemicals in the body. These chemicals, such as dopamine and serotonin, which affect a person's mood, have a significant influence on personality. If indeed personality traits are, on average, about 50% heritable, then environment still plays an important role. Unlike other animals, human beings have choice. If our genes program us to be anxious, we can choose a low-stress lifestyle or choose to meditate or do relaxation exercises. But because of the powerful influence of genes, most psychologists believe that there is a limit to what we can choose to do. Thomas Bouchard, a psychologist and the director of One Twin study, says that parents should not push children in directions that go against their nature. The job of a parent, he says, is to look for a kid's natural talents and then provide the best possible environment for them.
Chapter 10, Ceremonies, page 220, Activity 3, Previewing Vocabulary. Nouns: bride, coffin, coming of age, cremation, deceased, delivery, funerals, groom, guidance, incorporation, monks, negotiations, pregnancy, proposal, pyre, rite of passage, ritual, scriptures, taboos, trousseau, vision, vision quest. Verbs: chant, regain, vary. Adjectives: indigenous, nomadic, previous. Expression: ask for a woman's hand.
Page 221. Activity 4. Reading an article.
Rites of passage. Among many indigenous peoples of North America, a 16-year-old boy leaves his family and experiences a ritual in which he spends 4 days and nights alone in a small cave dug into the side of a mountain. He experiences cold, hunger, thirst, fear, and sleeplessness. He has with him several objects of symbolic value. One of these is a pipe. The belief is that the smoke from the pipe goes up to the spirit world and allows power to come down. His hope is to have a vision in which he receives insight and guidance for his way in life. At the beginning of the ritual, he is a boy with a boy's name. At the end, when he comes out of the cave, he is a man with an adult name, and he knows what his livelihood will be. This ritual, called a vision quest, is an example of a rite of passage. Rites of passage are not found only in indigenous cultures. They are universal, found in all cultures, and include certain birthdays, coming-of-age rituals, weddings, and funerals. What are rites of passage? Anthropologists use the term rite of passage for a ceremony or ritual of transition that marks a person's change from one status or social position to another. Although such rites differ in details, they share certain characteristics. All rites of passage include 3 stages: separation, transition, and incorporation of the person back into the society. In the first stage, the person is separated from his or her previous status. Sometimes in this stage, as in a vision quest, the person is literally and physically separated from the community. In the transition stage, the person is in between, not in either status. In the last stage, the person rejoins the society, now with the new status. Birth rituals in Korea. Many cultures have a rite of passage that marks the birth of a baby. In Korean tradition, the rituals begin during the woman's pregnancy. Some of these rituals are still practiced today, but some are not. There are food taboos, certain foods that pregnant women are not supposed to eat. These include hot and spicy foods and broken crackers or cookies. In the past, close to the time of birth, there were various symbolic actions that signified an easy delivery of the baby. For example, family members left doors open and did not repair rooms, doors, or fireplaces in the kitchen. Today, as in the past, there is special care to keep the mother and baby well after the birth. The mother traditionally eats seaweed soup, full of iron, to regain her strength. She is also not supposed to drink cold water for 21 days. At the age of 100 days, there is a special ceremony. Family, friends, and neighbors gather to admire the baby, give thanks for the baby's health, and have a big meal. More important is the first birthday. At this time, the baby, dressed in a traditional outfit, is seated in front of a table with all kinds of objects on it. For example, they may include a bow and arrow, which represents the military, money, wealth, string, a long life, and a pencil and a book, knowledge. These days, people can add any object, such as a baseball, if they want their child to be a great baseball player. The parents encourage the baby to choose something. Everyone is very interested in which object the baby reaches for, because the belief is that this object indicates something about the baby's future. Now the baby is truly a person, a member of the family and the community. Islamic weddings. A wedding in any culture is an important rite of passage. In Islam, the specific stages of a wedding ceremony may vary from country to country, but most share certain characteristics. Typical is the traditional wedding of the Bedouin, nomadic Arabs who move from place to place, although these days many are settling in urban areas. A Bedouin wedding can last up to a week and reflects the ancient Arab belief that marriage is not just a joining of two people, it is the joining of two families. The first step in a Bedouin wedding is the proposal, in which the father of the groom, the man, and their close relatives visit the home of the bride, the woman, to ask for her hand in marriage. The next step involves negotiations between the two families and a marriage contract, a formal legal agreement. The third step is the henna party, for just the bride and her female friends and relatives. At this party, there is song and dance, and the bride's hands and feet are exquisitely decorated with henna, a dark brown paste. The henna is more than just skin paint. It is associated with health, beauty, and luck. After this, the groom's relatives arrive at the bride's house. Men perform a special dance with swords, while women admire the bride's trousseau, the personal objects that she will bring to her marriage, such as clothing, gifts from the groom's family, and jewelry. The jewelry is usually large, made of silver and expensive stones, and decorated with calligraphy. In the fifth step, the men and women sit separately, and guests bring gifts. In the last step, as the bride enters her new home, she and her new husband meet for the first time. They are officially married. Actually, there is perhaps one more step. 1 week after the wedding, the bride visits her parents and brings them gifts. This is a symbol of her comfort in her new home. Funerals in Thailand. A person's final passage is death. Every culture has rituals in which the person and his or her family make this transition. In Thailand, a Buddhist country, people believe that after death, the person is born again in another body. Everything the person did in life, both good and bad, determines whether the next life will be a good one or not. Of course, family members and friends want to achieve a good rebirth for the deceased, and this is a major goal of a Thai funeral. As a Thai person is dying, the family members encourage him or her to think about Buddhist scriptures, holy writing, or to repeat one of the names of the Buddha. Then, after the person dies, the family takes the deceased to the temple. They lay the body down, cover him or her, and place one hand outside of the blanket. The family and friends show respect by washing the hand of the deceased. Then they put the body in a coffin. People burn candles and sweet-smelling incense around the coffin, and Buddhist monks come to chant, recite prayers. In the next step, perhaps 3 days, 1 week, or 100 days later, friends, relatives, and monks take the coffin to the cemetery for the cremation, at which there is more chanting. The coffin is placed on a funeral pyre. At this point, people come up to it with white paper flowers, candles, and incense. One by one, they light the pyre and the body is burned. It is believed that when the body still exists, the spirit can benefit from the chanting. However, when the body is cremated, the spirit is cut off from the world. After the cremation, people go home. The family usually takes some of the ashes home, but some families keep the ashes at the temple. The timelessness of rites of passage. The origin of such rites of passage is unclear. However, there is reason to believe that such rites existed long before the beginning of history, before there was any system of writing to record the rituals. In caves and on rock walls all over the world, there are paintings from the Paleolithic era, Old Stone Age, exquisite art that may have been part of the people's rituals. In the graves of even these very ancient people, objects have been carefully placed. Anthropologists believe that this may be evidence of early religion and of the human need to mark the transitions from one stage to another in their lives, a universal, timeless need.
Page 227, Activity 1. Identifying the main idea and writing a summary.
New days, new ways. Changing rites of passage. Vision quests for everyone. For centuries, Native Americans have gone through vision quests in hopes of gaining guidance and direction. Several companies and organizations are now offering a similar experience for non-Indians. For a fee, anyone who is looking for a new direction in life can go to certain wilderness areas in Canada or the United States and go through such a ritual. The details may vary from one organization to another, but in most cases, experts in psychology or Native American culture help to prepare the person in advance. This preparation usually lasts for several days and includes meditation, natural vegetarian food, lessons in the meaning of a vision quest, and perhaps dream groups, in which the seeker of the vision discusses his or her dreams with psychological analysts. As on a traditional vision quest, people on this New Age quest spend 1 to 4 days alone in the wilderness. However, a difference is that they might choose to sleep in a tent and to bring drinking water. Some Native Americans are angry that non-Indians are doing this. They see it as a fad and say that the quest is meaningless to a person outside the culture, tradition, and religion. A new Emirati wedding. In the United Arab Emirates, on the Arabian Peninsula, the traditional wedding seems to be changing, at least for some people. A typical Emirati wedding is extremely lavish, elegant, expensive, and huge. There might be 1,000 guests at the 3-day celebration for the bride and groom. The groom has to pay these bills, and after such a wedding, the couple begins their marriage in terrible debt. Each wedding seems to be bigger than the one before it. Several years ago, the government decided that things were getting out of hand, out of control, so they started a marriage fund. This is money for young Emirati men who agree to marry Emirati women, not foreigners. Many of these men agree to have a group celebration. At one such group celebration, at which the UAE president was the guest of honor, there were several of the components of a traditional wedding, a lavish feast of exquisite food and entertainment by Bedouin dancers waving their swords. The difference? There were 650 grooms. It was, one person pointed out, a symbol of a new spirit of economy. Getting married, Japanese style? In Japan, too, weddings are different these days. A popular wedding is a seiyaku, which means sincere vow or promise. Although less than 1% of all Japanese are Christian, 80% choose this Western-style Christian wedding. It certainly looks like a Western wedding. The bride wears a white gown, for example, and the groom wears a tuxedo. It also closely follows all the steps in a Christian wedding. There is the processional, in which the bride walks down the center aisle of the church to join the groom at the front, hymns, religious songs, readings of Christian scriptures, the exchange of vows, and of course the wedding kiss. In fact, some people say that this new Japanese Christian wedding is more traditional than most Christian weddings in the West, except for the fact that the couple is usually careful to choose a lucky day for the ceremony. So why do so many Japanese choose this style of wedding when the Japanese culture already has rich, beautiful marriage traditions? One answer may be that this is a trend, and the Japanese are somewhat famous for following new trends. Another reason may be that traditional Japanese weddings are even more expensive than those in the Western style. Weddings anywhere, anyway. While most Japanese weddings these days are in a traditional Western style, many couples in Western countries are looking for a non-Western wedding experience that expresses something of their personal interests. It is now possible to get married in a helicopter, on a ski slope, in the ocean, with dolphins in Florida, in a hot air balloon, or in a drive-thru in Las Vegas, in which the couple stays in their car for the ceremony. For couples who want both to travel and have a traditional wedding, just not perhaps their tradition, it is possible to have a Hindu wedding in Goa, India. The groom wears an Indian kurta, and the bride wears a red sari and traditional Indian jewelry with her hands decorated in henna. They walk around a pyre 7 times and repeat their 7 promises of love. The ceremony is conducted by a Hindu priest, either at a temple or on a beach. Unique ways of moving on. People are also designing unusual funerals. Several years ago, after the death of an American man who created a popular TV series, his body was cremated, and the ashes from this cremation were sent into space to spend eternity among the stars. In Britain, there are special funerals for people who love motorcycles. One company offers slow, fast, and very fast funerals. In Malaysia, a group called 33 Taiping Music Band plays music at funerals. They perform at Buddhist, Christian, or Hindu funerals. The lead singer, Chan Yoke Cheong, speaks fluent English, Cantonese, and Mandarin, so it is not surprising that he also sings in these languages. But what might be surprising is that he also perfectly sings hymns in Tamil, an Indian language he does not speak, at Hindu funerals. The band wears white shirts, black pants, ties, and large leather cowboy hats. Maybe the strangest recent funeral, however, was held in Pennsylvania in the United States. James Henry Smith had been a huge fan of an American football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. At his funeral, the guests walked into the funeral home to find Mr. Smith's body not in a coffin, but instead in his favorite chair. The deceased was sitting there, wearing the colors of the Steelers. On a small table next to the chair were a pack of cigarettes and a can of beer. In front of him, through the funeral, a TV played a video of a Steelers game. His friends and family knew that he would approve.
End of CD 2. CD 2. Interactions 2 Reading by Pamela Hartman and Elaine Kern. Copyright 2013 by the McGraw-Hill Companies, Incorporated. No part of this publication may be reproduced or distributed in any form or by any means or stored in a database or retrieval system without the prior written consent of the McGraw-Hill Companies, Incorporated. including but not limited to any network or other electronic storage or transmission for broadcast or distance learning.